Not the beginning, to be honest. I thought we started really brightly. I thought that we gave them some problems. I thought Momo Darius running behind the line really was impressive. And then you can see the first set piece goal, and then the second set piece goal, and then it just changes the entire feeling of the game. So I think by and large, if we were able to just sustain some of that, or maybe even score a goal, it would have changed the entire makeup of how it went. But yeah, when it all comes down to it, I think there's just moments in games that change how it all looks. And I know that's the cliche of goals change games, but I think for us it's just, and Eric said it after the game, we don't have time to overthink it. We have to take the lessons and then move on. We're not going to change who we are at this point in the season, but there are moments where we drop levels 5%, 10%, and things change.
What was your perspective on what went wrong defending those two set pieces?
I mean, I think they did a good job of making our line drop early with one guy stepping and then the next guy coming in. But then in that moment, it becomes, are we getting hands on guys and bumping them and slowing them down so they don't have free runs? Because inevitably you think we're dropping and then they're timing the runs off our drop. So it's really about, okay, well, are we getting enough push against those runners so they're not getting free headers? And both of them, I think we're pretty clean headers on the first contacts. The first one, it's a little bit of a scramble. Dane makes a good save, but then it's just about the second ball. But then the second one's just about that contact.
What did you feel like there was some you talked about the young guys starting out and kind of Dom as well. What did you feel like was working?
No, I think, I mean, we had decent little spells on the ball. We were able to play between lines, and you look at what Momo's profile is, what Darius's profile, and then Fitzy underneath. It's really, those guys can stretch and he can find the pockets underneath. And I think you saw moments and flashes of the things we wanted. But again, it just was one of those where once the first goal goes in, the second goal goes in, the plan starts to change a little bit.
Obviously, you've been talking all season about playing for trophies. Now that, at least for the Supporters Shield and the U.S. Open Cup, probably those chances are gone.
Sure.
What do you sort of point at for the last 3 games of the season?
I mean, I think if you're in a top 4 spot in the league, it's Champions League for next year. I think it doesn't change the fact that we're still going to try it with everything we can to win the Western Conference. It doesn't change the fact that MLS Cup is still well within our sights. So the point Eric made about flushing this down the toilet a little bit is super important, because if you allow these things to dwell and sit on your conscience too much, you start to overthink it, and then it bleeds into the next result, and then playoffs can end quickly.
How long did you kind of dwell on
Wednesday? I mean, I think the evening, because it ended so abruptly, I think you look at it as a gut punch for sure, but you knew that you had this game coming up, so that you just don't have time. I mean, I took maybe Thursday morning, and then after that, it's the next thing coming. So when you have kind of the next game in your sights, it's easier to move on. And again, I think the way we started this game was positive, but ultimately it's about results right now.
How much, when you have a couple of injuries that sort of come up in the week, how much does that sort of weigh on you too? Where you go, oh, we're out, and we lost 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you don't want guys to get injured at this point in the season, but you play the hand you're dealt, right? I think we're here to try to adapt and move forward and not make victims of ourselves.
Thanks for the time.
Thanks.
Eric, I imagine you thought this game would be difficult coming off Wednesday. What were the frustrating parts?
Yeah, I think it's one of those outcomes that you really hope you won't see, but there's at least a percentage of you that can smell it coming to an extent. And I think, again, I think everyone knows that the context is very clear. I'm not going to stand up here and endlessly talk about it, but I think it's very visible that was a game too far for us this week with where we are, with the level of depth that we have. And I've made the point to the players at the end there. I think what it does show, and this is a double-edged sword in that it's a real compliment to the physical level that we've been at over the course of the season, the level of discipline, aggression, organisation, competitiveness. And I think when you see a drop-off in that sense, then we aren't the same team. And this week is that perfect storm of where we come from on Wednesday, playing a team that is for sure a very talented team, and I don't think that the position they're in probably reflects the level of talent they've got, certainly across that front line, and they're in that spot where they're desperately fighting for the playoffs, and albeit we're in the game for spells, I don't think we ever had that sense of being in any way dominant, even in the ways in which we are typically. So I think it's a bit of a reality check in that sense as to what is required to get over the line, what is required as a club in general to be in a position to win trophies, to be competing for, on Wednesday night, a semi-final of the Open Cup, and then on Saturday competing for the Sport Shield. And unfortunately, it's been a tough week across two competitions there.
What, if anything, are your takeaways from this game?
Yeah, I think it's that, and that's where I've left the players. The big point is it certainly shows the way in terms of what we have to get back to over the course of the last three games, and we're now, I think, if there is a silver lining after the Open Cup on Wednesday night, in a position where we're not playing midweek games. I don't think at this point in time it's a squad that would handle what we've had to go through this week again. So I think the fact that we can concentrate on one game a week, we can really put our efforts into becoming again the team that we have been for the large majority of this season, and I think it does put into really sharp focus why we've been such a competitive team this year, because I think when you do see drop-offs across the areas that I've mentioned so far, then it's like watching a different team, and it was a tough watch that tonight for sure.
Coach, what was your impression on perhaps your defense? It just seemed a bit messy this evening, that sort of thing. Yep.
Sorry.
And the second question was it miscommunication? Was it a sense of perhaps just unfamiliarity with the players, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think you can certainly point to the unfamiliarity, and again, I'm not going to try and lay these things out as excuses, because there was enough on the pitch, I would say, to be more competitive, or certainly I would have hoped that was the case. But you've got three players on the front line that are starting games for this club for the first time with 3 or 4 games to go, which of course isn't ideal. You've got different combinations across the back line, and you've got some heavy legs and some heavy minds, I would say, on account of what happened on Wednesday night. So there is plenty of mitigating circumstance, and I think this is it's always a fine line to tread as a coach, because it's naive to ignore that there is a wider context at play that is of course influential in this, but also I don't want to lay the excuses out in too obvious a way, because I feel like on our day it's probably still a game that we can win, and I would have expected more, and certainly the way in which we concede the goals, certainly the first two, is really disappointing. So I think we're now in the fortunate position where, as I say, we're not having to go through what we've been through this week again, and we can focus on getting back to where we were, and I think we've got a really well ingrained way of playing, and players that are really dialed into that. So I don't worry in any way that we will implode from this point onwards, and we make sure that next week we go and we play with that same competitiveness that we've seen all year.
Any standout players for you this evening?
No, I don't. I think it's difficult to pull standout performances when we were so obviously not for any period dominant team. I think we just about coped in certain periods in the first half, but there's certainly not anything to write home about on anyone's front, I wouldn't say. And I don't think if you stepped into that dressing room there'd be a player that would put their hand up and say they played particularly well, but. Yeah, in the same breath, I probably wouldn't say that there was anyone who was distinctly worse than anyone else. So it's one of those nights that I think, I've used the phrase again with the players there, we have to have a really short-term memory when it comes to some of these instances at the moment. We're not going to become a different team. I'm not going to start giving the players different messages. It's just important that we can very quickly recapture what we have been for 80-90% of this season, because it is obviously it's a very good footballing product, and one that we know we can be really competitive with.
What were the issues in particular, set-piece defending?
Yeah, I think number one, the number of unnecessary set plays we gave away was really disappointing. I think we gave away really cheap fouls. We gave away really cheap corners, which against a team that has their level of effectiveness on set plays is obviously a naive starting point, and I'm sure Dane will be disappointed with the first, and Morris will be disappointed with the second. I think the second is the delivery is very good, and the player that puts it in the net is powerful. He's tall. He's got all the characteristics that allow a player of that profile to go and score off a set play. So I think sometimes there are instances like that where you hold your hand up and say difficult to defend, but for sure there's things that when we look back we'll tighten up on. But again, I think that lack of rhythm, that lack of familiarity, that lack of real consistency across each of the players in the line on the wide free kick amounts to a far messier picture than we would typically. I think if you look at the first goal, probably a big learning curve for Darius there, and these are the types of teething issues that you expect of an 18-year-old who's making his first start. Set plays aren't consequential all that often over the course of a youth career, and he'll certainly learn from that moment as well. But again, that is to be expected, I think, given this context.
You spent a lot of time talking about chasing trophies this season. Now that maybe for the next 3 games the chance of trophies is gone, how do you sort of switch gears, and what do you sort of set your team towards now?
Yeah, well, I think we've obviously got the real focus on finishing in the top 4, and I think we've got a great chance of doing that if we can find that level of competitiveness again. I think it's a bit of pill to swallow, I would say, because it's such a hard position to get yourself into. I think as a club of our sort of standing in the pecking order, where you're competing for multiple trophies, I don't think it's well. I know for sure it's not something that happens every year. So I think for us to have that sense of it fizzling out a little bit across 2 competitions in the space of 4 days is difficult, and it will be the measure of me as a coach and the staff that I've got and the players themselves to make sure that we find that sense of purpose again come Monday, Tuesday when we're back in, and really push for a strong finish and build that momentum again before we hit the playoffs. And I know it's a group that is capable of doing that, and yeah, we have some issues we've got to overcome, but we will find the way, I'm sure. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.